Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Jockey podcast. It is a beautiful Thursday morning here in Pennsylvania, and I'm Marley, the co-host of this podcast, and I happen to be sitting here with Mr. Kenneth H. Fiddler, also known as the Jockey, and the inspiration for this podcast. We heard a little scuttlebutt in last week's episode that Mr. Fiddler's ship, the Lucky Loy, was headed back to Boston to be converted to an APD, which stands for Auxiliary Personnel Destroyer. Since I am no sailor, I will save the definition and implications of an APD for Mr. Fiddler to explain. What I can share with you is that the conversion was a major Navy Yard operation, and the crew and officers moved ashore and into the tremendous Fargo building. While the crew didn't work extensively on the ship as they had when they first commissioned it, they had a lot more spare time to spend in Boston and a lot more time to get into some trouble.
Trouble? What's that?
I think you know a thing or two about a little bit of mischief. So, what sort of fun things did you and your fellow sailors do while in Boston?
Well, first of all, we got leave. They divided the ship up, port and starboard.
What does that mean, port and starboard?
Well, the port is one side of the ship, and starboard is the other side of the ship.
And which side is either?
The port side is on the left side when you're facing forward, and the starboard's on the right side when you're facing forward.
Interesting. Thank you for that explanation.
And then the port side got 21 days leave, and they went home, and the rest of the other people were in the Fargo building and trying not to get in any trouble. And sometimes Carl Fink and I would go across the street from the Fargo building. There was a diner there they called the Greasy Spoon. And we'd go over there a lot of times for breakfast. A lot of sailors would go over there. They liked the food better than the regular Navy food.
Oh, I'm sure it tasted a lot better.
So that was a lot different than normal. Yeah.
Now, since most of you weren't actively working on the ship, were there other jobs that you sometimes had?
Yes. Usually when a bunch of ships are in port, sometimes different ships are asked to donate a couple of hours to help the shore patrol.
And what is shore patrol?
They're just like a military police. They just go where other sailors are out drinking and maybe getting into trouble, and they just got to check on them and help them when they need help.
So you were helping to corral the ruffians.
Yeah, that's about it.
Do you have any funny stories or interesting stories while you were on shore patrol?
Yeah. I wish I could remember the place in Boston where we used to always, most of the crew always spent time. There were all the bars were lined up in the couple blocks there. And when I was on shore patrol, I was with two regular shore patrolmen, and I just helped them. They showed me what to do. And one of the buildings used to be a movie building, but they were having striptease shows there all the time, and that usually created quite a few sailors showing up there. So every couple of hours we'd stop by there again to make sure everything was fine. And we got there and we started watching the show. And all of a sudden one of the drunken sailors went up over the stage after the girls. And as soon as I seen that, I ran up on the stage too and grabbed the guy and drug him off of there before he caused any more trouble.
Oh, my goodness.
And then also, there were a couple of different bars that we knew got filled up, and a lot of times they had trouble with drunks. And we got to one, it was almost midnight, and they were wanting to close up. But they had they had 3 drunks in there they were trying to get rid of, and they were having trouble. And they asked us to get rid of them. So 2 of the fellas through the shore patrol went in and drug them out. And then when they were outside there, there were 3 of them and there were 3 of us.
So a brawl ensued.
And they started fighting, and pretty bad. And the one shore patrolman was having trouble with one of them, and he gave him a big push, and he went right through the big plate window. So he got hurt pretty bad.
Oh my gosh.
And while that was happening, one of the others snuck up behind me with a knife, and he was about ready to put it in my back when the other shore patrol saw him, and he had a baseball bat. He hit him with that. And other than that, I must have been a little lucky.
I can't get over how cowardly that is to come and try to stab you in the back and not face you.
Well, they don't think of that when they're drunk.
No. And they don't think that you're their ally.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Well, shore patrol sure sounds scary.
Yeah, it could be.
But again, luck is always on your side. Well, luckily you didn't have to spend much more time in Boston, even though it was a great experience. By the latter part of December, the Loy left and set sail for Norfolk, Virginia, where they began training in the Chesapeake Bay. I realize that this is pretty close to the holiday season. Did anyone get to go home for Christmas?
Our captain received a letter from the mother of a shipmate's girlfriend. It started that her daughter was in family way. A certain sailor was responsible, and she thought he should do something about it. The captain spoke to him about it, asked him if he was responsible and what he wanted to do about it. He offered to get him a good lawyer if he wanted to fight it, or to give him leave if he wanted to get married. The sailor went off to get married, while all the rest of us sat in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. I often wondered if his decision to go was the right thing, was influenced by the opportunity to go and leave over the holiday. And he's the only one that went to go for Christmas. We all spent Christmas on the ship.
Oh, that's a riot. He might have made the choice to do the right thing only for selfish reasons to go home for Christmas. Wow. Well, Christmas isn't the only holiday right around then. It's also New Year's. What was that like aboard the ship?
Upon the completion of our training, we proceeded to New York, where we stayed for less than 2 days. Those who were not on duty will never forget the New Year's celebration prior to our embarkment for the Pacific. I will also remember that last night on New York City, because I was one of the unfortunate ones who had to stay aboard for duty, and everybody else was celebrating New Year's Eve.
In New York City.
In New York City.
Oh, well, that time you weren't so lucky, but you can't pick and choose when luck favors you. Well then, what happened on New Year's Day?
On New Year's Day, we left 36th Street Pier, New York City, at about 1600, en route to the Panama Canal Zone. This trip promised warmer days and smoother sailing as we escorted a British carrier also headed for the Pacific. After we went through the Panama Canal, we went on to San Diego, California, and we were waiting there to leave to go to Pearl Harbor, and they explained what we were going to be doing. And it wasn't until then we found out about the type of duty we might expect, because our ship had been converted to an auxiliary personnel destroyer. We possessed most of the advantages of a destroyer escort, as well as additional ones. We had more firepower, enlarged living quarters to accommodate extra men and officers, 4 landing boats, a large cargo hatch with cargo handling booms, and a grotesque paint job which easily blended in with the palms and foliage of the tropics. We were also attached to an amphibious forces. It didn't take much imagination to figure out what kind of work we would be doing, and yet no one ever imagined we would end up doing the work we did. Before long, we became familiar with the underwater demolition team.
Interesting. And what was the underwater demolition team responsible for?
What they did, they went in landing boats when we were about ready to invade an island or another country. And before they would go in there, they would just have flippers on their feet, swimming suits. They painted their shoulders silver color so that when they swam in, they'd look like white caps. And when they really went in on an invasion, we would take them in landing boats, and then they'd swim in all the way into the beach. And during the invasions, they would take out everything that needed to be blown up before the invasion. And then they'd come back to the ship and talk about it. And eventually they would do that. But anyway, that's in the future.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that in an upcoming episode.
When we got to Hawaii, we eventually met them at Maui and picked them up and worked with them. But we still had a little time to do things at Hawaii.
So what was Hawaii like? I know that you got a tattoo in Hawaii, didn't you?
Yeah, Carl Fink and I were out celebrating, and I think we might have had one or too many beers maybe, and we seen a tattoo place, and we decided to get tattoos.
What was yours of?
And I got one on my left-hand shoulder, and it was sort of a Navy picture of a flag, and
there's an eagle on there too, right?
Yeah, and it's like an anchor. And Carl just got his wife's initials put on his shoulder.
Oh. Did it hurt?
A little bit. And it has a bunch of needles. And it would hurt a little bit, but of course we had a few beers, so you didn't notice it so much.
Was it an older Hawaiian woman who did it, or a man?
It was a Hawaiian woman doing it, yeah.
Cool.
And when we get back to the ship, of course, we had a lot of fellows that had tattoos. I know we had an officer, an ensign. He had tattoos all over his body almost. But when they seen what we had, they warned us that you better stay out of the sun, keep it clean. If that gets infected, you're not getting paid while you're infected.
Oh, what a threat. So I'm sure you were very diligent about keeping that clean and out of the sun.
Yeah. We didn't have any trouble, though.
Well, I feel like that's a rite of passage in the Navy to get a tattoo. I'm sure you weren't the only ones to do it.
Oh, no. Quite a few.
And you got to see some hula girls dancing, right? They came out. We're looking at a photo here.
Yeah, that was interesting. They were all dressed in, what would you call it?
Grass skirts?
Grass skirts. And we were tied up along the dock, and they lined up there and did their dance back and forth.
Oh, wow. What a treat. But it wasn't all fun and games. There was still some work to be done. What other activities took place during this time in Hawaii?
Well, one thing we had to do before we went on, they put our ship in dry dock, a floating dry dock. And they had to check for barnacles and things like that, scrape everything off the bottom of the ship. If you don't do that, it slows down the ship, dragging with stuff like that.
Got it.
And then one of the fellows was our radarman, Ken Little. He was one of the fellows that helped to check for the barnacles and everything. And then after they were done, we went back to Maui and picked up the demolition team. They were team number 4, and they arrived aboard. They filled out extra living space with 100 men and our cargo hatch with powerful explosives. These men were highly trained demolition specialists and swimmers whose mission roughly was to make reconnaissance of beaches and destroy underwater obstructions in preparation for initial amphibious assaults.
Interesting.
Yeah. They already had been in one invasion. They were in the invasion of the Philippines. And during that, one of their boats had a direct hit, and they lost some of their men. So it doesn't make it look like it's very easy to be doing.
No, it sounds like a very difficult yet important job.
Yeah.
Oof.
Upon their arrival on board, we moved out into the harbor and anchored. And for a few days, they left the fellows swim off the fantail. And while we were doing that, they had 2 boats in the water continuously circling the ship.
Looking for what?
Each boat was maintained with a rifle-carrying sailor who watched for sharks. We were anchored off the island of Maui, and we were told was a leper colony nearby.
Oh, like an actual community of people who were lepers.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Sure you didn't go over there. And then on February 15th, you guys left Pearl Harbor and proceeded westward to the Philippines. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, on the way to the Philippines, we made stops at Eniwetok, Marshall Islands, and on March 4th, we anchored in Leyte Gulf, just in time to become the object of an enemy air raid. There was 0400, and a Japanese plane dropped the bombs about 2,000 yards from the USS Loy, hitting the beach of Leyte. We continued our training while we were there, joining other ships and waiting moment orders. We also found a way to work in a few beer parties on the beach. We didn't mind that.
So I guess the Japanese bombs didn't deter you from moving forward with life. On the beach with some beer.
Might be the last time for a while.
That was a taste of what it was like to be back in the hot seat, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, folks, it's about that time again. This is Marley and the Ping Jockey, and we're signing off.
Bye-bye.